Welcome to a football show here on the 440 Sports Network. Of course, live on a Friday morning, 8 a.m., special edition because I am exhausted. Zach Lyons, Braden Gall, welcome to the program. We've got a lot of stuff planned for you today. Zach, I am on my third cup of coffee in less than an hour.
I'm running on 0 cups of coffee. I'm not a coffee drinker.
That's a borderline serial killer move, I feel like.
No, I drink Celsius energy drinks. That's not a joke, but I've said before when the whole Ryan Tannehill recharge thing, I'm like, he's way late. I've been drinking Celsius energy drinks for like 6 years.
Aren't energy drinks really, really bad for your
No,
body?
not
Though?
these. These are like all natural energy drinks.
Well, give us some cash, but sponsor the show. Well,
I have reached out to Celsius to let them know that we have a very popular show nationwide, and they need to jump in on this.
And we have thrown 3 fewer interceptions in the playoffs. So
that is true.
Just want to point that out if they want to sponsor someone who doesn't throw interceptions in the playoffs. That's a low blow. I'm running on fumes, Zach. I've had no sleep all week, but I'm back in the home studio. We'll be back next week, of course, in the Cast Collective studio. And on Monday, completely all Titans, back to Titans, previewing camp, which is going to open up, of course, next week. We got a lot of fun stuff. There's a couple of Titans topics we'll get to maybe a little bit later on in the show, but mostly going to focus on the Vols. We're going to focus on media days, the players, the order of predicted finish, all the good stuff that happened down in Atlanta. Special thanks to Jay Dunn for taking care of us. They are friends with the Kingston Group, so they're not going to get angry about this. The Kingston Group, of course, is our title sponsor here on the football show. BuildKG.com, Nashville's locally owned custom home and remodeling firm. Have a conversation with them, of course, before we do anything else. All right, what else do people need to do to get involved in the product?
They need to head over to the YouTube channel, 440 Sports YouTube channel. If for whatever reason you don't like the green emblem, head over to the Broadway Sports Media channel and subscribe there too. We just need you to subscribe, watch, and interact. We're on Facebook. You can subscribe and interact and set notifications on over there. We're also on Twitter. You can turn on notifications. Now, I don't think they fixed our algorithm to be able to interact with us. You won't be able to tell us how stupid we are or how smart we are. You got to do that at Facebook and YouTube. So head over to those pages. Head over to all of them.
Just all the places.
The Facebook, all the places. Turn on the notifications, and that way phone rings, vibrates once, you kind of ignore it. If it vibrates 3 times, then you know that the show is on.
Yes, and normally you wouldn't need to guess on a Friday morning if we're coming on or not. Again, this is a special edition.
That's why you turn on those notifications.
That's true. I was traveling all week. Maybe there'll be some special editions later this summer as we now have football literally weeks away from happening. I can't wait, both college and pro. And of course, again, most of the time, almost every time, Monday and Thursday, 1 p.m. across all platforms. Get involved that way. Also, you mentioned the YouTube page. I mean, I don't know. I think 15 different videos up there from Atlanta. A lot of conversations with players up there. A lot of conversations with experts in the media.
You had a lot all kinds of content this week. I mean, you got to go to the 440 Sports YouTube page and check out all the work that Braden's did, all the interviews and all that kind of stuff.
Also, special plug here for Lamestream Sports, our sports media and business podcast. I had about a 20-minute conversation with Herb Vincent, who is the Associate Commissioner of Communications for the SEC. He's basically number 2 or 3 in command behind Greg Sankey, and got him to talk about planning the event for Nashville, potentially for next year. Also talked about what it was like immediately after the news for Oklahoma and Texas broke last year and how they sprung into action and how they prepare his speeches and all kinds of stuff. So there's literally wall-to-wall content everywhere. But of course, we'll combine all of the biggest pieces of news you need to know about SEC Media Days right here into this here show. So rate, review, subscribe, and jump in the comment sections if you have any questions.
Yeah, let's wrap up some SEC Media Days because you allude to the fact that they may be coming to Nashville. If you want to start there, that next year, SEC Media Days in Nashville.
Yes, they'll be in Nashville next year. The question that everyone was asking is where, how, and why, because the event in Birmingham, Zach, is very, very tiny. It's like this tiny condensed little hotel, the Winfrey, that is attached to the mall, and it people get packed in there, and Radio Row is just like an airplane tube. It's just but it's a little bit more charming. There's a lot more fans in the lobby. It's in the state of Alabama, so on Alabama.
You also get the benefit of a food court in the mall.
Some would call that a benefit. Others might not, myself included. Great restaurant.
Steak Escape, just douse it in the steak, the all-purpose seasoning and some malt vinegar.
Yeah, there's some really great killer barbecue joints though in Birmingham, but I think the
Dreamland's
rest
barbecue. Oh,
uh,
it's the best.
sauce. Give me Sauce Soul Kitchen. I will say this: Atlanta has a far better food scene, so I
Yeah.
like going to the Atlanta event better because of how big the city is, and I just love the culture and the food and everything better. It is far more spread out, which is nice, but it is far more corporate and stale. I'm saying all of this to say, what is it going to feel like when it comes to Nashville next year? My first guess is going to be Music City Center attached to the Omni because they're across the street, and the Omni is where we were all this past week. And I can see that being you tie it into Bridgestone. Here's the other thing. I think they want to make it more of a fan-friendly event. And I could see the Hall of Fame the Hall of Fame park there by the Hilton in the Country Music Hall of Fame being very much integrated to like a fan fest so that like kids can come out. If they were smart, this is what they will do next year. And it would add charm to it. It would add some energy to it because there was none of that this week. Very, very stale, very corporate, it's not even chill's not even the right word. It was just sort of blah.
Will we get media passes, me and you both, because I know you do, for SEC Media Days? Will you bring me along and we broadcast live there?
How well
if
are you
you're
gonna
not sick of me by
how
then.
well are you going to behave over the next 12 months is the question.
I mean, nothing more than what I've already misbehaved already.
If you maintain status quo on misbehavior, I might be able to get you in.
Yeah.
I mean, they credential basically everyone.
Gotcha.
Over 1,000 people attend this event, and listen, we'll get into some of the other stuff here as we wrap up. But again, I do think if I'm betting, I would bet Music City Center mixed with the Omni, mixed with Bridgestone, mixed with the Hall of Fame Park. That campus looks like a top spot in my opinion. And again, I hope they make it an outdoor event with a lot of fan stuff, punt, passing, kick type of stuff for kids. Have the players.
I think you're asking for heat exhaustion. These kids to die from heat exhaustion.
Yeah, these with the way the world is today, I agree with you. That would be careful. It was just so stale, and the coaches didn't say anything at all. I think one of the most interesting things to get it to real football here. I think one of the most interesting things is that, and maybe I'm not in this group because I work with Athlon and we put the magazine together months ago, and so we have to study these teams really, really carefully. But we know less about these teams than ever before at this time of the year.
So you mean there's less clarity, right? I mean, to clarify your statement with the word clarity, you mean less clarity. It's a little bit more murkier, and it's a guessing game behind the top two teams.
Yeah, and there's reasons for that. Number one, we've had like real hard news each of the last 3 years. You had the pandemic 2 years ago. You had Texas and Oklahoma right in the middle of media days last year. You had the USC UCLA thing. You've had name, image, and likeness and expansion. We'll get to some of those conversations this week. But you've had all this real, actual big news in college football. And now you've got the transfer portal, so players are moving around. LSU and Ole Miss, for example, are built almost exclusively on transfer portal players. So we just know less about these teams than ever before. And I find that to be really fun. Like, it's really interesting to debate 2 through 5 in the East and 2 through 6 in the West. And I think it's going to make for a really entertaining season. I think there's a lot of good teams. We talked about it on the episode on Tuesday. It's a really balanced league outside of the top with Bama and Georgia. But again, we know less about, and this goes for all of college football, we know less about these teams than ever before heading into seasons. And I find that to be a fun and positive thing if you are a fan of chaos, which I am.
Yeah, I think it's funny, and we'll get to what I'm talking about later, but I think it's funny that we know less about the teams, but we know more about the student athletes. I think that is hilarious because of what you've said on this show in previous years about them allowing students to be in front of pressers and stuff. But let's get into this lack of clarity, or maybe we can bring some clarity. Who are the runner-ups in both these divisions?
So my official prediction, my official ballot, and you feel free to comment and or destroy and or mock these all you want, Zach, and all the listeners. I'm fine with that. In the East, we'll start there because obviously it's going to piss off Tennessee people. Number 1, Georgia with a bullet. I think they're a 14-point favorite in almost every game. I think there's maybe 2 games they could lose at the end of the year, Mississippi State and Kentucky. I have Kentucky at number 2. I have the Wildcats at number 2 because
even though Will Levis puts mayonnaise in his coffee.
I know, and he did it again. Like this is also my problem with media days. Like you can, if you try, and I like to think that we did this at 440 Sports, where I was trying to get thoughtful answers from players. You get nothing from coaches, but I try to get thoughtful answers from players on like real questions about why things are working at places like Tennessee and Arkansas, Mississippi State. Like, why are coaches Stoops at Kentucky? Why is it working? Right? Like, again, players had fantastic answers, and we'll get to some of those in a minute. But you just don't like the coaches don't really tell you anything. But the stuff that goes viral, the stuff that like gets all the run, is all the stupid shit that doesn't actually mean anything. It's like Will Levis. Oh, hey, let's make him put mayonnaise in coffee. Like we've talked about this like 5 times now. Let's make him do it and drink it, and then it goes viral. And Mike Leach is going to talk about neckties and whatever. Like, it's the stupid stuff. Like, I took a video of Lane Kiffin's shoes, and like that, thousands of people wanted to see that, and I'm like, why? I don't understand it. It's the Ouroboros of like, why is content dumber? Why are consumers not wanting better content, kind of thing? And again, hopefully you come here to get better content.
So
but
Kentucky
number 2, yeah, Kentucky number 2.
Interesting. Because I would think Kentucky has a real hard time. They have a real hard schedule this year, but they also have a real hard time beating the good teams. And I have to see it to believe it. I would almost say that I think Tennessee or Florida are like your 2A and 2B, and Kentucky's is firmly behind them. That's where I would go.
Okay.
And I think I'm going to go with the upset pick, and it's going to, again, upset the University of Tennessee fans. I think Florida is gonna be second place.
Wow.
Something about this Florida team, Anthony Richardson, and about their coach, Billy Napier. I kind of believe in everything that's going on and think that, okay, Florida is going to rebound pretty quickly. They always have a lot of talent anyways. It's always about the coaching. What can the coach do to get them and these players and utilize the talent, put them in the best place to succeed? And I think that Napier can do that.
So I don't disagree with anything you just said. I would love to yell at you.
Maybe I'm a year off. Maybe I'm a year early.
I think you're a year off, but that would be my guess. But again, during this time slot, people like to yell at each other, so I should yell at you, but I don't. I disagree. I agree with everything you're saying. I talked to a couple of different people that have Florida at number 2, and it's all the same things that you like, and I like Billy Napier. I think he's got the right temperament and big picture strategy to get Florida where they need to be. The administration is buying in. Again, the case for Florida is very easy. They have a potential superstar quarterback in Anthony Richardson. So, again, the offense is going to be good. My concern with Florida is the depth of the roster, because Dan Mullen's issue was that he didn't recruit well. And Kentucky, for me, so my argument, we kind of know what Tennessee is.
Right.
We don't know as much about Florida. We know a lot about Kentucky. And to me, it's about the continuity. It is about the star quarterback. It's about the best running game maybe in the East outside of Georgia with Kentucky. It's about a defensive line that was the highest recruited defensive line in the history of Kentucky football from 2020, a couple of years ago. Who do you trust more to develop a defensive line than Mark Stoops, who takes nothing but 2- and 3-star players and turns them into top 10 draft picks? Now he's got 4- and 5-star players to work with. I just think that defensive line is going to be salty. They play Ole Miss and Mississippi State in crossover, which is real easy. Tennessee has to play LSU and Bama, which is not. Florida has to play LSU in crossover as well. So to me, there's all the things. I think the roster is deeper and more complete at Kentucky. The coaching staff is more established. They got the quarterback. They've won 10 games twice in the last 4 years. Like, that is already proving it to me. So I'm all in on Kentucky and Florida has a absolutely disgusting schedule early. And that's why I think they're going to come out of the gate slow. I like Tennessee at number 3. Famous last words. I think Tennessee beats Florida this year. Very famous last words. So I've got Kentucky 2, Tennessee 3, Florida pretty clear 4, and we'll talk a little bit more about South Carolina later. I've got South Carolina at 5, Missouri at 6, Vanderbilt at 7. But to me, it's that top 3, Kentucky, Florida, Tennessee. You can make an argument for any of those 3 at 2. You can make an argument for any of those teams at 4. That is the great debate in the East, is going to be those 3 teams.
And I think we'll know a lot more, and Stoney brings it up, when Kentucky plays in Florida on September 10th, which is going to be a huge game. And that I think will let us know, where is Mark Stoops at? Is he going to be able to be the team that everybody thinks he can be? Or is Florida really starting off a lot hotter than everybody expected?
Yeah, nice wedding photo right there, by the way, Stoney Keeley. Congrats again on the nuptials. I will say, they play Utah in week 1. I think they're going to lose that game. They play Kentucky, and then they play Tennessee. That is potentially 3 top 25 teams in the first month of the season for Florida with a brand new first-year coach rebuilding a roster. Like that to me is a difficult. If they get through it, watch out. You're absolutely right. They could be super dangerous and better than people think. I think they're more like 1-2 or 1-3 to start the season, or 2-3 to start the season, and then they get better as the season goes along, and they're real good in the month of November.
Well, is the West any less murky? Or because to me, I feel like it is. I feel like it's Texas A&M, and that's it, right?
Okay, so you're probably right about that, but I mean, again,
or are you saying that maybe it's Texas A&M is second, and
no, you're
Alabama's second? Like
no. Bama. I think Georgia goes 12-0, and they're going to get to Atlanta, and they're going to crush people along the way. Maybe there's one loss in there somewhere, maybe, but they're going to be 12-0. Alabama is going to be 12-0, and it's going to look even better than Georgia. Bama is going to decapitate people. They're going to murder people. The defense is the best I've seen at Alabama in probably years. And oh, by the way, they have the best player in college football on offense and defense. This is at Arkansas is a tricky game. At Tennessee could be tricky for a half. There's no chance Texas A&M beats them. They are. I've never felt better about an Alabama team winning a national championship than I do this year, and that they've won 7, folks.
Yeah.
So Alabama won. I tried all week to find a way to move A&M down from the 2 slot. I felt like I was spending all week going, man, I really like Arkansas. I really like Mississippi State. I think LSU is going to be better. A&M tends to lose games they're not supposed to. But I think they're on a trajectory here for next year. And if they pick the right quarterback, they are number 2. I think you're right. A&M is ahead of that pack. But at Mississippi State, LSU,
it's like they're in a tier
Arkansas,
by
Ole Miss.
themselves, right?
Kind of.
A&M is in a tier by himself, but the third tier, and if you were on the YouTube, you could see this. The third tier is just like right underneath them. So it's like LSU, Mississippi State, and Arkansas are like inches away from being in tier 2. Like that's how the margin of error for Texas A&M is slim, I think is what you're saying. But they still are clearly ahead of the other 3 teams.
That is a perfect way to put it. They are clearly ahead, but the margin for error is very, very small. I think that's exactly how I would explain it. And honestly, Ole Miss and Auburn are not really far off that next tier either. Like they're almost. I mean, I think you could argue they're on the same tier as Mississippi State, Arkansas, LSU as well. All 5 of those teams. Again, I think there will be 12 bowl teams in the SEC, like 12 teams that go to the postseason, and maybe 10 or 11 that have winning records. Like it's Missouri and Vanderbilt, and that's it, that are at the bottom. Everybody else, I think, is going to a bowl game, including Auburn. I think Ole Miss is at the bottom of that group as well, just above Auburn, because I think you're asking a whole lot of a roster that's just not all that complete and depth, not much on defense. They're using the portal. I'm not sure what they have at quarterback. I just think LSU, Mississippi State, and Arkansas are the 3 that are right there. My ballot went Bama 1, A&M 2. I have Arkansas at 3. I have Mississippi State at 4, LSU at 5. But here's the thing. I would say Kentucky, Tennessee, LSU, Mississippi State, and Arkansas will all be 8-4.
Wow. That would be impressive. I mean, considering, schedules taken into play, playing each other and stuff, I think that would be I think you're looking at, outside of Ohio State and maybe Michigan, the best teams in college football. I mean, like, if you were to do 10 of them, in my opinion, 8 of them would be SEC teams.
Now you're going to get like my college football nerd to come out a little bit. I think there are lots of really good football teams elsewhere. The question is, we don't know how good they are. And I agree with you in that any of these teams, A&M in particular, but if Tennessee has that 9-3, 10-2 type of season, they're top 10. If Kentucky has that, I think there's a chance Kentucky has 1 loss going into the Georgia game with a chance to win the division, and then they get stomped by Georgia, and they finish 10-2 again, and maybe they lose to Tennessee, but again, that would put them top 10. If Arkansas finishes with 9 or 10 wins, that could be a top 10 team. I do think the 3 teams in the Pac-12, USC, Utah, and Oregon, are very good. I think Notre Dame is very good. I think NC State and Clemson are both very, very good in the ACC. Baylor, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, the top 3 in the Big 12. but like we don't know if any of those teams are 1-loss good and playoff good. They could all be like 2 or 3-loss good, and that would put them in the same category as some of these teams we're talking about in the SEC. This is one of the like least parity years because it's Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State at the top, like with a bullet. But after that, 4 through like 25 is all really fun and interesting. And I think we're in for like great college football. I think it's going to be a tremendous college football season.
I don't know if it's because I've done this show and we've talked more SEC football than I have really ever in my life since I probably graduated college. But you got me hype. I'm hyped for this college football season. You got me. I'm hooked. I'm probably going to watch a lot more college football than I ever have. It's really going to make Lauren mad on Saturdays, but that's just the job, right?
Yeah, I know. I've told when my wife and I started dating in 2013, early in January, I said, no one's ever made it past week 10, hon.
Yeah.
And she got me a gift card in week 10, said, look, I made it.
There you go.
Yeah, great question here from Stoney Keeley. Which teams are most well equipped to dethrone Alabama and Georgia from a matchup standpoint? This is a tricky question. Nationally, it's Ohio State. That's it. Like if they get to the playoff and they're that good, the only team that I think can beat them is Ohio State. The only other team I would put in there is Clemson because they have the best defensive line in America. And if the quarterback works and develops, I don't know if you saw the clip of Dabo Swinney from Media Days.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody thinks he's old slapdick, and like Dabo went off. It was great. He's wearing milk-bone underwear, and people are chomping at him everywhere he goes. I'm like, only a Southern football coach can say that, like right off the cuff. I think Clemson could hang in a game with one of those guys, but nationally, it's nobody else. In the SEC, it's the one-game situation. Right, it's Arkansas is not going to beat Alabama in the division, but could they beat them at home in Fayetteville on October 1st while they're looking ahead to A&M? Maybe. They only lost by 7 last year. And with Georgia, same thing. They're going to play Florida, and then they're going to play Tennessee late in the year, and then the very next week they're going to go to Mississippi State. Cowbells, Will Rogers, Air Raid, Mike Leach, really good football team at home. Almost played very well against Georgia last year or 2 years ago. To me, those are the 2 games I'd keep an eye on, and then at Kentucky for Georgia as well at the end of the year. I'm less worried about that one because Kentucky plays the same style, and I don't think you can beat Georgia playing the same style. I think Alabama showed us in the championship game last year. You got to sling it around, and I think that's why Mississippi State could beat them. But that's it. Like in the SEC, I don't like. Again, I think Alabama is going to murder people. It is not going to be fun to watch their games. Like you might enjoy it.
I'll enjoy it.
You'll enjoy the first half, maybe. Like, do you actually enjoy the game when it's like 38-0 in the third quarter? Like, are you?
It depends on who they're playing. So if it's 38-0 against UT, or if it's 38-0 against Auburn, LSU, people that I know where I talk to regularly who are fans of the opponent, then yes,
you want to talk shit to them.
All in. I'll watch the whole game. But if it's like 38-0 against
they
Vanderbilt, I'm out by I may not even watch a Vanderbilt versus Alabama game before it even starts.
No, they that's like a mercy killing. They play at LSU and at Ole Miss. Like I don't think Ole Miss even has a prayer, and so that's one of those games. I do think the LSU game could be mildly interesting because they just play. LSU plays so up to Alabama, no matter how good they are, and I think that could be tricky. But I'm telling y'all, like this is outside of like I don't even have a question about their roster. Like there's not even a maybe left tackle, maybe corner. I don't even know what to ask about Alabama. I think they're going to murder people.
Well, speaking of murdering, I think everybody has murdered this topic and it's in the grave because to me, NIL and expansion is getting so stale because nobody has an answer. Nobody has a clear path. There's nothing to really talk about. It's like almost like until something happens, there's no reason to talk about these topics anymore.
I think NIL, you're absolutely right on. People are tired of it. Our eyes have been glazing over for months. Every single coach and people in the ACC and the Big 12 did this as well at their media events. Greg Sankey's done it. Nick Saban did it this week. Like I heard Kirby Smart talking about it. I heard everybody talk. It's like,
but they're all saying the same thing.
And here's the problem, though. They say, well, all we want is uniformity and transparency. Let's all play by the same rules, which is basically all they've said the entire time. They just did it with like more colorfully. I did like Jimbo Fisher saying, our everybody's got these little things in life, but ours just went public from the guy who called the press conference to make it go public. I thought that was funny. but no one offers a solution. Like they offer like a broad strategic solution, but they don't offer the specifics of how it would work, and that's the problem. And check out an interview I did with Richard Johnson of Sports Illustrated on the YouTubes. He talks about like how Congress, like Greg Sankey, is trying to get Congress involved in this, and I just my head starts to hurt immediately when I hear that. Yeah. But he explains why that's maybe the only direction that this. At least he was trying to present a solution, right? None of these people have solutions. So I'm with you on that. It's done. It's sort of like a murder topic. When you talk to the players about it, it's fascinating. Like Hendon Hooker's, and we'll get into this a little bit later on, but Hendon Hooker's got a book. He's day trading. Will Anderson's launching a company to help protect athletes. Like there's lots of cool stuff that the players are doing. The people in charge just want to bitch about it, and they have no answers. Expansion is a little different. Expansion to me, when you look at numbers on like podcasts and you look at numbers on TV ratings and on like expansion plays, people like to talk about expansion because it affects everybody. The problem is it comes in these waves.
Right.
We get a big piece of news, and then we want to know, what does it all mean? And then after a few days of no news, it's like, all right, can we talk about football now again, please?
Exactly.
And that's what happened at Media Days. By about Wednesday, we were all like, can we argue about who finishes second in the East now, please? But there's going to be some news. From what I understand, there's going to be some news. The Big 12 wants to swallow as much of the Pac-12 as they can. The Big Ten's in on this as well. The Oregon and Washington are not waiting around. I think the big boys are still set. The question is what happens out west, and I think that could then trigger some more movement. But until that happens, there's nothing really to talk about.
Yeah, I think the guessing game is fun for like the what ifs. What if this happens, or what if that happens is fun after the first set of news breaks, and then it's like, okay, nothing's really happening. You're exactly right. Nothing's really happening. And then it's like we spent like 20 minutes talking about, Notre Dame, or we spent 20 minutes talking about what's going to happen with the rest of the Pac-12. And then for weeks, we don't get answers. And then it will suddenly explode.
Yep.
And then we'll do the same. We'll be in a cycle again. It's a cycle for the expansion talk.
And you asked me, I think it was like 3 weeks ago, right when the USC UCLA stuff broke, you were like, what do you think is going to happen? And I was like, nothing. And you were like, oh, really? Like you don't think it? I was like, no, SEC, Big Ten, Notre Dame, they're not doing anything for a while. I'm not going to say like sources, and I'm not reporting this. There will be movement west of the Mississippi. I think sooner rather than later. I think mid-August would be my guess. So I think we're a couple of weeks away from this. But the Pac-12 right now is in the middle of their negotiating window, and they're going to have some pretty big decisions made in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So I would say look at mid-August for the next round of news, maybe earlier, and then after that there could be some ripple effects. But I still don't think the SEC is doing anything. I think the SEC is staying right where they are for a while.
Well, we'll go from west of the Mississippi to east of the Mississippi and talk about how the Volunteers are super relaxed and confident this year, which we've alluded to on the show, that they have every reason to be relaxed and confident. Maybe not relaxed, but they should have everything to be confident in, because they have Hendon Hooker coming back. They have Josh Heupel's system, Coach Josh. They have all this stuff that is going to carry over from last year and build upon this year. I still think that they have a good shot of being kind of the upset pick to even beat Georgia and become first place in the East. I know I'm alone in that.
No, I think they could beat Georgia in the game. Maybe.
Yeah,
it's a long shot. It's in Athens. I don't think they're. I think you're underestimating how good Georgia is and overestimating how deep Tennessee's defense is.
And that could entirely be. You got the vibe that they were kind of feeling the same way. Are you okay with them being relaxed? What does relaxed mean, and can that be a negative?
It can be, not in this case. Like, to me, it's quiet confidence versus like lackadaisical lack of interest. Like there's a difference between those two things, and it is all because of Josh Heupel. And I asked Cedric Tillman this, I asked Hendon Hooker this, I asked Josh Heupel this. Why is the communication working? I am fascinated with, like, this goes to Vrabel and the Titans too. Like, why does it work? Why does it land on people? Why does it get through? Why does the message work? I'm fascinated by that type of leadership. I know you're a big leadership guy too. And I asked Heupel, and his response, he goes, look, the first meeting we had, the very first meeting I had with my players, we spent an hour and a half, and all I did was ask them questions and listen to their answers. And then I listened to every problem they had. We addressed them early in the first few months that I was on the job. And then Cedric Tillman, same question for him, wide receiver, and he goes, Josh Heupel has 10, 15-minute personal conversations with every player whenever you need to, all throughout the season, off season. And he specifically said, if more coaches would do this, they would be more successful. And I was like, what a novel concept, just talking to your people. It's amazing. So all of that to say, they're just like in it together. They're bought in. They're in it together. Their offense like went from 23 points to 38 points a game last year. I don't know how much better they're going to get, but they're very confident. They know exactly who they are on offense. They're going to score a boatload of points. I think 32 to 35 per game automatically, even against the good teams. That is the confidence there. The defense is totally different. There's 2 good edge rushers, and that's about it. We don't know who's going to play in the middle. Jeremy Banks is a nice piece, but there's not a lot of linebacker depth. The safeties are okay. There's no cornerback depth. Like, we don't know anything about the defense, and they got to play at Pittsburgh, at LSU, Florida, Georgia, at South Carolina late is a tricky, sneaky game. Kentucky's really good on offense. Like,
so they're just looking to probably outscore their opponents this year more so than stop their opponents.
I think that's sort of Josh's plan all the time, every year. But this is why they have to recruit the way they're recruiting, is they've got to get dudes on defense. And until that happens, I'm not picking them to challenge that 10-2 mark. But hey, if it happens, it's because of the culture. And I know that's a cliche, but we give Vrabel credit for this. I think Sam Pittman deserves credit for this. Mark Stoops at Kentucky deserves credit for this. Mike Leach at Mississippi State. Like, when you get people to buy in, man, you can do things. And they are just relaxed. They're confident. They know who they are. They look like they're working together and they care about each other, unlike the previous guy who just destroyed everybody and broke, like Jeremy Pruitt would just destroy you on the sideline if you like dropped a pass. And like, you were, it's just not the way you work. And
he would destroy you if he sneezed in a meeting. I mean, like, I never liked the Jeremy Pruitt hire for Tennessee. And I'll be honest, I was kind of dismissive of Coach Josh's hire until I see it. Like, that was the thing, is that, UT fans would always hype up these coaches and then they would flame out. I bought into what Coach Josh is selling after a season and seeing this offseason work. There's nothing that Jeremy Pruitt ever did for me to ever buy in for him. No. And I thought the same thing when he was defensive coordinators, here in Alabama. I said, when he got the job over there, I was like, he's always kind of been successful with other people's players.
Yep.
I don't know if this guy can recruit and if this guy can coach and be a player's coach, which oftentimes has to work in a college level. And I think it's also interesting, the difference in Josh Heupel getting people to buy in and Coach Vrabel getting people to buy in. Because I feel like Coach Vrabel's like, we're going to win. This is the way. Buy in or get out.
Yeah,
and
that's
Coach
true.
Josh is like, we'll be fine. He's like kind of like your hippy dippy. It's like a military dad and a hippie dad.
It's Coach Dad for sure. You were right on about that all along. I'll give you one this is a deep nugget for those of you who watch. And this is why we hope that you watch. I heard this is off the record, not off the record, but like on background, not official. I heard a story about Jeremy Pruitt trying to get a head coaching job by going through the governor's office to fire the head coach of a university.
What? What a weirdo.
I say that not to like break news. That's not the point, because it's not really, I can't, the point is, and again, purely just a story, allegedly, as we say. But it just sort of paints the picture of who he is. Again, he's just not a fully formed adult. I don't know. Like Josh Heupel's a fully formed adult. I will say my opinion on Josh Heupel as the head coach of Tennessee has not officially changed. I think he's a solid, good football coach who's going to make them better right away, which we saw. The offense is going to work most of the time, but unless they have players that match Alabama and Georgia's caliber, he is not the guy to win championships at Tennessee. That has been I question his upside. That has always been my stance on him. So far, he has done everything right, and they are very, very, very confident offensive team.
Because it's UT football. Okay, so there's a big difference between the football worlds of Kentucky and the football world of Tennessee. Can he kind of be like a Mark Stoops kind of coach where he's like there for 10 years but never really wins the big games? Or will UT football run him out of town even with winning records of success by year 5 of his coaching career if he doesn't produce some
No,
kind of tangible progression into the college football playoffs?
no, I think you got to win the division. You got to show competitive balance with the best teams in the SEC, because again, the difference between Kentucky and Tennessee is like the resources, the commitment, the facilities, like all of that for Kentucky was atrocious when Mark Stoops got there. It is better, but it's still not even close to what Tennessee brings to the table. Again, Heupel's recruiting very well right now. You need like 4 of those classes before you're going to be as good as Georgia or Alabama. So like the upside, I could totally be proven wrong, and he could win divisions and get the team into the playoff and compete for SEC championships. But I need to see that part of it. I am seeing what I thought I knew about him, which is he's a professional adult coach who treats people well and is going to get the offense going right away. We've seen that, and let's see how high that can take him. But the only way to get to that top tier is to have dudes on defense that are the same as Alabama and Georgia. And until they've got 3 classes of that, they're not going to win the SEC East.
What is the leash for both these coaches? Because I know that's not the topic, but I wanted to ask this earlier when we were talking about Kentucky, and I forgot. What is the leash on both these coaches? I mean, Mark
Kentucky's
Stoops,
he's not even on a leash. Like he's
like there for, he could be coach for life if he wanted to.
He's like the border collie that has the run of the farm. Like there's no leash, there's no fence. He's never going to like he'll just run around as much as he wants. I think the only way he leaves Kentucky is if he goes to Iowa. He's an Iowa alumni. Kirk Ferentz is the longest tenured coach in college football. He's got like 23 years there. If and when Iowa and if and when Kirk Ferentz ever wants to retire, Mark Stoops could go there. I think he's got no leash. I don't think he's on a leash. Heupel, I don't know. I think right now he's fine. It's really long. They're going to have a good year this year. Once he has to replace Hendon Hooker, we'll see how good Nico Iamaleava is. We'll see how good the defense starts to get. Can they keep recruiting this way? Like everything's on the right track. But so was Butch Jones. Like Butch Jones went from 5 to 7 to 9 wins in his 3 years, and everyone was like, all right, and recruited well. So we've seen the story before. I just think we need to there's a lot more substance with Josh. I don't think, Butch was a shyster car salesman. Josh is a pretty genuine dude. So it's about the upside for him. That's the question. Yeah. I think 4 years from now, like his 4th season, if they have yet to get to 10 wins, that's when the leash gets a lot shorter.
Well, let's talk about student athletes who they basically were stealing the show all week, in your opinion. You brought it earlier, Hendon Hooker's book. What is this about?
So this is the case every year. They are the best part of the event, period, full stop. It's not the coaches blathering on radio stations. It's not them arguing with each other. It's not Greg Sankey's statements. It's not NIL or expansion or the order of finish. It's none of that crap. The best part of the event is the players, period, full stop. And Hendon Hooker is publishing a book, a children's book about his faith with his father. He is a day trader with like he's teaching kids about financial principles. Like this is an extraordinary young dude who cares deeply about his teammates, his community, his family. It's just like I just am blown away by the level of accomplishment some of these guys have. Will Anderson, who's the world's best defensive player and arguably one of the highest graded out defensive prospects in modern NFL history, didn't do a lot of NIL last year and now has gotten into NIL, but to help other athletes manage NIL. So he launched his own company. And again, if you want to hear some of these guys talk about this stuff, head over to if you're on the YouTube page, I've got some clips from all these athletes talking about this stuff. He's launched a company to try to help players navigate the space and look out for other players that, again, right now, it's pretty predatory. Like if you sign a contract, I need a lawyer to sign a contract. We all need lawyers to sign contracts. So I think the players are just extraordinary. We talked a little bit about the Bannister kid from Missouri, Bumper Pool at Arkansas. I had a chance to talk to him. Like Cedric Van Pran, the offensive lineman for Georgia, is
wait. Is that his nickname, Bumper Pool?
No, that's and actually Jalen.
We know where his parents conceived him at.
Jalen, yeah, I was underneath the pool table at down underneath the ML Rose Pool Hall. Free shout for another sponsor. No, I think
Jalen ML Rose has a pool hall.
Now remember the old Melrose underneath, like it's.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So Jalen Catalon is a really good player for Arkansas, the safety, and he was asked like, When did you learn that that was his government name? Like that was his government issued name, Bumper Pool. But again, he's like, I grew up in Texas and we hate Texas. But he again talked about Sam Pittman and how he communicates and says, he comes into a room and he completely commands a room, and we would go to war for this guy, and it's because he go to war for us. And again, Derek Hall, the Auburn defensive lineman, one of the best defensive linemen in the league, talked about how he had to deal with all the is Brian Harsin getting fired stuff, and he goes, yeah, me and a couple players went into the office to try to convince the ADs and the presidents to keep Brian Harsin because of the kind of guy he is. Like, these guys are extraordinary.
That's kind of like big news to me. Like,
well, I think it was kind of out there that it had happened. Like, a few players went. He didn't get into the details of it, which I respect, but he basically like offered the type of wisdom you only get like when you're like 40 years old. He goes, man, we just learned as a team how fast it's all going to go, how quickly anything you love can be taken away from you. Like he had great perspective on life and about his career at Auburn. And again, I can keep going, like the number of guys that just are extraordinary. Again, Cedric Tillman for Tennessee talking about like, hey, if more coaches just talked to their players and had conversations with them about their lives and about what's going on and about good and the bad, like they'd be more successful. BJ Ojulari, the defensive end for LSU, is giving advice to reporters that's like really sound, like, hey, just get to know us and build a relationship and then we'll help you out. Like these guys are just Stetson Bennett, man. Stetson Bennett is a cocky, arrogant little dude, but I think it's because he deserves to be, and people keep disrespecting him, and he's just like, I can't deal with that. I can't worry about it. I led 2 scoring drives against Alabama in the fourth quarter of the national championship game for a national title, a ring for the first time in 40 years for Georgia, and people are still asking questions. I can't do anything about it, and so he's, he has a right to be, pretty confident and cocky, and these guys are, the personalities are great, the thoughtfulness is great. They're just so. I just wish SEC football coaches allowed them to talk. I wish we could have access to them as media to tell their stories, and then maybe we wouldn't have like Asthmagate, when they get to the NFL.
Well, we go from basically good personalities to a boring personality, and is Clark Lee a life model decoy? Now, you're not big into Marvel and all that stuff. A life model decoy is basically a robot that is more advanced and sophisticated, where it's essentially human. It passes all the metal detector tests, all the tests that you would, essentially.
Is this a Tony Stark invention?
No, it's technically Shield. It may come from his father, Howard Stark, but it is a Shield thing.
See, I know a little bit.
You do know a little bit. I mean, Tony Stark. I think that's Tony Stark built a robot suit, and I think that you just made that connection. But they basically replace humans, and until you actually kill one, you never know it's a robot. So, is Clark Lee a life model decoy?
There's a chance. Here's the thing with Clark Lee. I think his message is full of substance. I think his leadership is full of substance. I think how he wants to execute his plan is full of substance and real stuff. And I think it lands probably extremely well in the meeting room. I think one-on-one with players, it probably works really, really well. I think it works really, really well with the team. But there is no public flash at all to it that gets you excited. That he just doesn't have the ability to go off script. He doesn't have the ability to sort of just like be himself. And like all these ball coaches who are just like old dads can like riff, and they can kind of sell you on a vision, and they can get you excited and energized about stuff. Josh Heupel does it pretty well. Sam Pittman does it great. Shane Beamer is like the epitome of this. I don't know about
Shane Beamer really stole some hearts. We'll talk about in the next topic, but he really stole some hearts.
And we'll talk about how much substance is there. That's the question. Yeah. It's the opposite with Clark Lee. I think there's a lot of good stuff there. He doesn't know how to project it out into the public, and that's what you kind of need to do to get people excited about your program at this particular event. It is not what's going to help you win games. So let's be clear. It's not that important, but he's I don't know if he's ever going to loosen up and just sort of be himself. I mean, if they win like 5 or 6 games, maybe he is more confident next year.
Remember when he first got hired and he was on radio shows, he was kind of a good interview, and it just seems like, and he wasn't boring.
You got to ask the right question. You got to ask the right question.
So it's kind of like Vrabel. You can get Vrabel talking if you ask the right questions.
Right.
Except for Vrabel's always entertaining, whether he's mad, angry, or whatever.
No, I've interviewed Clark on radio, and I could like hear him through the radio start to smile when we started talking about like leadership books and like because he's got like a huge library that he gives to all his players. And like if you're going through something in your life as a player on or off the field, I've got something to help you with that is sort of his model. And that's that's really good substantive stuff. It doesn't until you get him talking about that stuff. He's just like, we're building a program with players from the ground up. We're going to tear them down. And we had to go through this thing last year that was really tough to begin. We tore the house down to the studs, and now we're going to rebuild it. And this is going to be great for the program. And then we're going to keep working. And we know it's going to be hard. And it's just like he's just reading off the paper, and he's got to do a little bit. You got to be a little bit more than that. His comment that caught a lot of flack was we're going to be the best program in the country.
Yeah.
And I don't.
Yeah, okay.
So I think I know like what he means is we play in the best conference in America. We play you get to live in Nashville, Tennessee. You get to get a degree from Vanderbilt University. Like I get the argument of why it could be perceived as one of the great like all around places to be an athlete. But like actual wins on the field, like no.
Yeah.
That's not what we're talking about here.
Going from Debbie Downer to the life of the party. Now, I probably should have phrased this differently. Does South Carolina have Braden excited? Let's just forget that the why is there, because you put out a tweet asking a question in similar fashion.
Yeah.
You know, why is it just all Shane Beamer hype it? Is it everybody falling in love with him as a coach? Why is South Carolina, I think out of all the teams that were in attendance at media days, all the SEC teams, nobody helped their stock more in the public eye than South Carolina.
I would agree with that. And it's because he is the opposite of Clark Lee when it comes to presenting himself. He's got the best TikTok game. He's got the best speech game. He's got the best rah game. Like he's got all of it. The question is how much of it is substantive behind the scenes in the program. They were way ahead of schedule last year. They won 6 games. They could have won 3 games last year. They lost to Vanderbilt in the final, or they beat Vanderbilt basically on the last drive. They beat East Carolina basically on the last drive. They got Auburn when they were trying to fire a coach. They got Florida when they did fire a coach. They also could have won a couple of other games. Like it was a crazy team to watch. And people love Spencer Rattler. He is arguably the most talented quarterback in the history of South Carolina football, and he has not thrown a pass for them yet. So there's substance there with Spencer Rattler. Very good tight end group. They're going to be good. They're going to be better on offense. So I went in thinking 4-8 for South Carolina. Last year was a bit of a mirage. A lot of people are talking like 8-4, competing with Tennessee and Kentucky in the East, and I'm like, I'm not there yet. So while I've increased my value on South Carolina, 6-6 probably is where I'm at now. I think they've separated themselves from Missouri pretty clearly. I think they're closer to Florida, Tennessee, and Kentucky than I thought, and that's why I've moved them up in my head. But I haven't changed their ranking in the East. I had them 5th going in. I've still got them 5th coming out. But you're right. They're the team that helped itself the most was and that was the most buzzy behind the scenes, where everyone was talking about everything's going on, like coaches, players, ADs, media people. South Carolina is a team that sort of people are buzzing about, and I'm just not ready yet to say that they're as good as Kentucky or Tennessee or maybe Florida.
It reminds me of the off season for the NFL when teams are hyping up the Browns or they're hyping up the Jaguars a couple of years ago after they went to the championship game in 2017, and even now how they hype up the Colts. The people aren't infatuated with the personality of maybe ownership or the coaches or what have you. And I think they kind of like a car salesman. I think they get a little bit of pizzazz and they're like, oh, these guys are going to be good.
I think that's fair. I think that's right. And again, Spencer Rattler, he is sort of the deciding factor here, much like Anthony Richardson for Florida. If he is great, your point about Florida being the number 2 team in the East is possible because Anthony Richardson could be that special. If Spencer Rattler lives up to the hype of his talent and they can maximize his ability, then South Carolina is really dangerous. Again, they play Tennessee late in the year at home. That's a really dangerous game if Spencer Rattler is real good. But why would he be better with a lesser offense in a lesser system in a tougher conference and a tougher schedule? Like that's my question: is why, if he couldn't do it with Lincoln Riley's offense with Oklahoma's players in the Big 12 against Big 12 defenses, why would he? Why would it translate? But
the only way it could translate is if he matures in his approach to the game and on the sidelines and in his leadership, because he was a immature mess over in Oklahoma. So
yeah,
can he put together? Can he and Shane Beamer's personalities mesh well enough to where he's going to live up to the expectations that were on him, but just in an entirely different setting?
Well, and Shane Beamer, if you don't know, Shane Beamer recruited him to Oklahoma. He was on the staff, so they have a very deep relationship. So that's part of why he's there. And to be honest, it also could be the reason he lost his job at Oklahoma. Could very much be Caleb Williams is the best quarterback in America. Like that's right. There's also some perspective and context there as well. So I do think, again, he is the most talented, physically gifted quarterback South Carolina's ever had. And if he can maximize that, then I can see why people are buying in. I'm just sort of in wait and see mode on that, even though I've bumped them up in my head a couple of wins. I went from like 4 or 5 wins to probably 6 or 7 wins. But I don't know what that means in the standings.
I think they're a firm 5th. I just don't see them being any better than 5th in the conference.
That's fair.
Or the division, I guess.
Yep.
Well, you've been consuming SEC information all week. News, interviews, all that kind of stuff. Do you have any questions? Do you have any questions for me on what happened in Titans world?
Oh, I can't wait for this. We'll do rapid fire, okay?
Okay.
How concerned are you that Sam Pittman is talking about things that we talked about 6 months ago?
Not concerned about that he is talking about it. And I think there is a huge difference, because I said this. It's not a big – Treylon Burks right now, his conditioning is not a big concern to me. Does not mean I don't have some concern. It's not no concern. It's just not a big concern.
It's not new concern.
It's not new concern. It's the same concerns that we talked about that. We're going to have to see it in training camp. Right. I'll grow concerned in training camp when certain things are being not done or done by the staff and their decisions and what he does on the field. It's just hard for me to just like overreact just because they lost A.J. Brown. And that's really what it ties back into. Oh, they lost A.J. Brown. And I see a lot of people still saying Isaiah Wilson.
Stop.
This is just not the same guy as Isaiah Wilson.
No,
it's just not. And someone asked, Tic Tac Titans asked, who does the Locked On Titans podcast network, asked, well, have you met him? Well, I don't. And I responded, I don't have to meet him because he is eating donuts in the middle of Charlotte late at night. He isn't running from the cops. He isn't getting DUIs. He's not drinking lean and putting it on Instagram and TikTok. He's eating a bag of Doritos on the boat. That's what he did.
Yeah. That's, to me, it's insane to compare the two.
It's absolutely insane.
I think this was Mike Herndon, of course, your former co-host at F Words Pod. By the way, check out the F Words Pod. I think he was talking about how far we've come as the Titans fans have come in terms of like celebrating Tajay Sharp and Rashard Matthews, and then now we're wringing our hands over Robert Woods and Treylon Burks. Like, where's the perspective here, Titans fans? Like, what are y'all talking about?
And I'm going to put out a question out today because it's kind of like a trap. I'm trapping people.
Oh, I like it.
I'm going to put Ryan Tannehill's stats up, and we're going to do a game of over and under. Because if the majority of people choose over, then the majority of the people, we do not miss A.J. Brown. That's just how I think about it. And now I've just ruined it, but.
Austin Hooper and Hassan Haskins can't catch all of the passes.
Right.
Like that's not the thing. So so in theory, you're making the case that your concern is a grower, not a shower, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just like, okay, I at this point, I just don't see the reason to be extreme on one side or the other. I'd like to be reasonable and rational. And listen, maybe that doesn't sell listens and clicks. Maybe I need to, go back to where, a couple of years ago where I was talking about, I don't know, something hyperbolic and all that kind of stuff. But to me, it's just I'll be concerned when there's an actual tangible reason to be concerned.
So, how upset were you that Adoree Jackson just railroaded his former coach?
Well, he didn't. And I wasn't that upset. And I think people misconstrued why I put that up. And then you see all these other websites and everything. They would have never have known that would have happened if I hadn't tweeted that stuff.
How could that tweet that you posted be misconstrued? Like I
didn't say give my opinion one way or the other. I just stated the facts. And
I know.
And so they go back and probably listen to it, which is probably going to be one of Steve Smith's highest rated shows in Tennessee when they go look at the demographics. And to be honest, I would have never known about it if someone else hadn't told me about it that listens to that podcast regularly. So
yeah,
I didn't even know Steve Smith had a podcast until then. And now I will say this. I may listen again. It's just a poorly produced podcast.
Ooh.
I didn't really like it. But
what's these players in the NFL, like Tyreek Hill's doing this too, which first of all, he's a piece of shit, but whatever.
Yeah,
like,
he's saying some wild stuff that he's not going to be able to get out of later if it doesn't work.
And he's contradicting himself like from month to month. I see like a pull quote from his show and it's like Tua's the greatest ever. And then the next month it's like, this is the last chance for Tua. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, why? Who? First of all, you punched your pregnant girlfriend. I don't care what you have to say. In the stomach. What's wrong with you? Anyway, all right.
I don't really have any other... Jackson, he didn't really bash anybody. He just said we didn't mesh. And then Steve Smith went on this rant about Bill Belichick coaching tree and all this stuff. And like Adoree Jackson just sat there and listened to it. And
like he kind of,
which I am going to work on an article about that's going to be out next week about the coaching tree of Mike Vrabel, whose coaching tree is a part of, and all this stuff. Because
he is not a part of the Belichick coaching tree.
Well, we'll get there. I'm not going to spoil what I'm going to write. I don't want to spoil it because I'm going to write it.
Oh,
but
God,
I think that people are misconstrued and have a misconception about what Mike Vrabel's coaching tree looks like. And I also think that Adoree Jackson just confirmed what we essentially could put together and piece together from the last 2 seasons that he was in Nashville.
Yeah, like he just sits there and listens.
He has a lackadaisical approach to football, and he relies too much on and he's got an easy breezy West Coast attitude to the detriment of his football talent.
Okay. And
that's okay. If that's how he wants to play, that's how he wants to play. But I think it says good things about Mike Vrabel and this staff that they're going to take a chance on people with that kind of attitude if they feel that there's enough talent there to try to bring them out. I go back to Vic Beasley. I think that they knew of all the issues surrounding Vic Beasley. They knew of all the issues surrounding Isaiah Wilson. And I think that ultimately they felt that the risk and to the reward is great because they have seen that their system works 9 times out of 10.
Yeah, I agree. I don't really have any other Titans questions. If you want to listen to Zach explain a whole lot more about Adoree Jackson, go check out the F Words pod. I know you guys talked a lot about it.
Oh my gosh, me and Justin Graver, Titans Film Room, I didn't realize how many different topics we hit until I was trying to build the tweet and build the article. I was like, man, we had so many topics in just an hour, and it did not feel like an hour.
Yeah, it helped me in the airport when I was delayed 4 hours coming home, and it's also why I'm on my 3rd cup of coffee. And there you go. Okay, so huge Titans camp preview coming up next week, of course.
Rookies report today, Friday.
Woo, baby. It's going to be a lot of fun. Football is here, folks. When media days are done and camp opens in the NFL, college and pro football is here. We are weeks away from pads popping. It's going to be a lot of fun. Cannot wait. Make sure you turn on all the notifications, the YouTube page. Check out our great sponsors, of course. BuildKG.com is the website for the Kingston Group. Broadway Sports Media, 440 Sports. Check out the YouTube page again. All of the interviews from SEC Media Days are up there. Lots of players, lots of media folks that are up there. So go check that out. For Zach, I'm Braden. Anything else?
No, I think we're good.
Back in studio on Monday. So otherwise, have a great weekend, everybody. Thanks for hanging out with us. My name is Braden Gall. His name is Zach. We'll be back next week. This has been a football show.